Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the EveryMan on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Muntz.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And we have to apologize. We've been running around a bit this evening, but we have restored order in the universe.
Mostly.
And that's our job, after all. So somebody's got to do it. Are you good over there? Order is still coalescing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but tonight we're going to talk about, and I think, an interesting topic, which was sort of, I guess, a little orthogonal or a little related to a lecture we were watching yesterday. And the lecture was exceedingly interesting because it was hosted by a bunch of heavy hitters, philosophers and deep thinkers, and it was just an exceeding pleasure to watch it. These guys were just discussing, in many ways, the nature of Western thought and the nature of both the Judeo-Christian tradition. So it was going on. These are the kinds of things that we like to do in our spare time. Mm-hmm. Because stuff. That and drinking. But sometimes at the same time. But reel it in. So, but the interesting little tidbit that came out of that was one of the speakers mentioned that and in context, this was referring to the book of Exodus and to the Exodus from Egypt. So, in context, he was saying that the peoples of that time really didn't think of themselves as necessarily, at least conceptually, free-thinking, autonomous beings. Being able to decide for themselves. Usually, the way your social status worked out was you were beholden to or under the control of someone or something. And a bright dividing line in society was whether you were a free person or a slave, but they didn't even think of it that way. You were just either, a chattel in the service of some high official or some other entity, the state, for argument's sake, or you were potentially just let's say a shepherd or a herder with your own, think of Abraham, for argument's sake, as being sort of his own independent person, but yet still beholden to your God or to others in your tribe or your society as sort of your masters, if you will. And one of the outgrowths that they were talking about from this period was this idea of truly being free, truly realizing your own ability to have free will, and sort of that the way that narrative kind of flows out of this era and into our era, not seamlessly, but that's the origin of it versus some of the other origin narratives of people at the time, the Babylonians and so on and so on. But that's a long-winded way to say of our topic. Let me just cut to that, and then I don't want to cut you off. But is that we're talking about the origin of freedom? Where did that come from? And then the idea of the concept of free will. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to basically say that it has to do with understanding where your freedom comes from.
Exactly.
So, how would you like to approach this?
Well, I think we could jump off with a sort of another edifying quote, which is Tolle, and I found this. It's not exactly, but I think it's germane. So, do you want to go for that?
Sure. Okay. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity. which is the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. In other words, you're observing the thinker. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. Tole.
And that came up in the discussion too, didn't it, Margaret? Because they were talking about the evolution of the being, and the realization of that late Bronze Age people, the Israelites at the time, was that they were enslaved. This was Exodus, so they were enslaved in Egypt, and they weren't free to do what they wished to do. However, they also had sort of fallen into this idea of dependence, which happens a lot to any kind of enslaved person or people, is that you have sort of a Stockholm syndrome about the whole thing. Well, at least I'm getting my 3 square meals, at least I have a cot, at least I have this, I have protection. This happened in feudalism as well, where the serfs and the barons, and the serfs basically looked upon the barons as both their taskmasters, but also as their protectors. Give them their cot, their rick, and their due. But the idea that the Israelites yearned at a basic level to be free, but yet not being able to voice exactly what they wanted. Well, say, well, we want to be free to go worship our God in the desert, to follow the precepts of our religion, which, as I think one of the people in this lecture brought up, well, that's sort of kind of another type of bondage, if you will. And then as you said, the idea that the being, the spirit, the animus within these people was starting to reveal itself. This idea of the kinship with the divine, rather than, and it's there right in Genesis. God made man and woman in His own image and likeness, and what we would say today is that the spirit, the oneness with the all being, the being which is the observer of the universe, comes into incarnation. So it's within creation, but not of creation. It is separate from creation, and it observes creation. And that is the kernel of being. The being is separate from, within, but not part of. It is not. It is part of animating creation, but it is not the inanimate portion, the created portion, the universe which we exist within, is not entirely us. We are more than that.
Well, the first question really is freedom. What is it, and where does it come from? And to understand freedom, you must pretty much give credence or credit to some divine hand outside of you for the freedom to exist. In other words, how is it possible that you even have a concept of what is free? Being able to make your own decisions. How do you do that? You're not programmed like any kind of
machine.
And it's not purely animalistic, where it's just a sort of a stimulus response reaction based on survival. How is it possible that you can choose outside of either of these veins? What is freedom? And to understand that your consciousness is more than those, more than that. And the fact that you can observe what Tole called the thinker, or what was that phrase?
The possessing entity?
Yes.
which is kind of creepy if you think about it.
Well, yes. And we can jump off onto that in a second. But to establish the fact that freedom, which is what we all internally long for, the ability to make our own decisions, not have them made for us. Don't know if anyone has ever been in that situation where everything is decided already for you, and they don't check with you on if you even have an opinion on it. It's all prescribed. It's a very dehumanizing experience, even though you may not be treated as a less than, but empirically, that ability taken away from you, there's something inside of you that says, no, this is wrong. I have the ability to make my own decisions. And for whatever reason, if some, say, a cultural more comes in and says, well, you must do it this way because this is the way we've always done it for centuries. And you sit there and you go, you are evaluating this situation as if we are still in the circumstances of 200 years ago. And you're not reevaluating it. That's usually when your soul says, no. The reasons were valid back then, but they may not be valid right now. So to have that aspect of you, to be conscious of this, and then what is the phrase again? The
possessing entity.
The possessing entity is always just a very interesting phrase.
Possessed by your own thoughts.
Yes.
But I want to go back to this is very interesting what you brought up, because again, where does our root need for freedom come from, or our root idea of freedom? And that is, as you said, let's say there's a completely beneficent being, there's a completely beneficent other who wants to take every decision away from you, and everything is quote unquote for your own good, and everything is pleasant and everything, but yet there is never a treatment of you as an equal. You said, you may not be treated as a less than, but I think it's inherent in the fact that if you're given no say, even if everything is done for you that is completely meets every need, the heart, the being within you, rebels. And you would say, the thinker would say, but why? Everything that we want everything's being given to us, everything's wonderful, everything is pleasant, we're completely taken care of beautifully in this gilded cage, and yet the heart immediately says, it's a cage. It's, I am imprisoned. And the interesting little twist on this is that you're never actually, no matter what tyranny is imposed upon you physically, you can never actually assert control over another's being. They have to give it to you. And that in and of itself is sort of the kernel nut, if you ask me, of the root of freedom, is that you can never have your beingness taken from you by any degree of force or coercion. You must, through some subtle means, maybe it's not overt, but you have to agree. And the thinker, the possessing entity, which is so wonderful, totally comes up with the best phrases. The possessing entity is oftentimes there as sort of a devil's advocate, convincing, but it's all good, it's all fine, it's all wonderful, and this and that and the other thing, and we love this and we love that, and we like ice cream and cookies, but it doesn't matter. The thinker can rail on for eons, forever, And the being will always say in the soft voice of the heart, no. Just as you said, no. No.
It's not.
It's not. It doesn't
Truth.
matter how pleasant it is. It doesn't matter whether it was right 200 years ago or 20 minutes ago. My being cannot be enslaved without my will.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things are separate, but they are desperately intertwined as well. Your will and your being. And I think one of the guys, one of these lecturers yesterday brought those two things. It's the word and the spirit. You know, the animating spirit of creation and the word. Let there be light, you know, symbolically. It is exactly that. The will. There is the spirit of creation, the spirit which is below and beyond and above all things. Before there was anything physical, you know, the void drew order out of chaos, right? The void was created. But yet the will to do it, the word, let there be light, is also required. Not just the being, but the will, the free will. And the two of them together are trammeled. When they're trammeled, when they're in any way impinged upon, the heart says, no. I don't care how good it is. I ain't buying it.
I haven't made that decision.
Yes.
And that's the core part of it. I haven't chosen that.
And what Margaret is saying is not the little I, not the thinking I, the being.
It's not, yes, it's not the ego
Not the
saying
ego.
I, because the ego will say, well, it'll reason you into like, oh, this is beautiful, it's fine, it's this, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But your spirit and that which echoes through the soul, I have not given permission for that decision.
Mm-hmm.
It understands at a very basic level that in order to participate with something, you must choose to participate. If you do not choose to participate and it's forced on you, that's a completely different situation.
Mm.
And what's being forced, of course, is the physical body. But the soul and the spirit say no.
Right. And we consider, if you ask anyone what's the most grievous crime, they'll say, oh, murder and this and rape and whatever not. But no, but actually the most grievous crime is to force, to abrogate the will of the other. And all the other forms, all the other things which we call crimes, are really come down to that basic fact where my will is being forced. And yet it can never be truly forced, but you're put under pain of death, of harm.
Either that or they're going to harm something else that you care deeply about.
Exactly.
So under those conditions, it's not truly a free will, but that is the time when you must choose. And you must also, before any of this happens, consciously choose who you will engage with, because there will be promptings from within you that say, this is not who this person says they are. And it's checking back with that and saying, oh. Or I had people would come to me and talk about, oh, I'm in contact with this spirit or that spirit, whether they be human or animal or otherwise, angelic, they sometimes claim. And the warning was always, you must test this, because these entities that come are not always what they present themselves to be. And you must test to see what is true and what is not. You also have to be brutally honest with yourself, because there are a number of people who would come They're so excited about the concept of being able to be in contact with these other non-world beings, and the possibility of channeling them in. It was so glamorous to them. And it was always, you have to test this. You can't assume that everything that is in spirit realm that's contacting you is good for you. And that was an eye-opener usually. What do you mean it's not good? They're in spirits. Like, no, that's another realm. This is a different realm of existence.
Exactly. And that might harken back to the possessing entity in some ways.
Yes.
The thinker is what will see the glamour in something like that. And it's not, it doesn't have to be this sort of thing. The thinker is what sees the glamour in material goods, or in wealth, or in, it will bargain with you to say, well, it's, even though, we have to give up some of our freedoms, and, we can't do it, but look what we're getting. It's going to be, and the heart says, at a very subtle, soft voice, as Margaret just says, the heart says, this isn't what you think it is. This person isn't who they're representing themselves to be. The truth voice is a guide. If you have your being and you have your will, but you have other senses within your being. You can, as Tolle is trying to say, you can observe the entity. You can observe how the thinker is trying to cajole you into something. And then you've awakened a higher level of consciousness. Well, that higher level of consciousness has its own senses. It sees truly. It sees deeper. It's the tiny voice that says to you, this isn't quite right. And you ignore it because the thinker says, no, it's fine. Don't worry. It's all good.
No, but that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
You know when something is not clicking completely into place. There's not a wholeness. You feel like there's something missing. And whenever you get that feeling, don't ignore it.
And so, well, isn't it so easy to listen to the thinker and who wants you to ignore it because look what we're getting. Oh, there's a shiny car, or whatever.
Right. It wants to be the overriding authority that makes the last decision, which is rather amusing to me. That your ego or your thinker wants to believe that it makes the last decision. And when the truth of it, when you look at it that way, you realize that if you do it that way, if you have tried and experienced just using that thinking aspect and not listening to the other promptings that come in, there's always something that goes south. Always.
It goes sideways.
And, you have to go through that a couple of times to realize, what, there's more to this story than meets the eye. So that's always the question. If you've had enough experience, you realize that what looks good isn't always good in the end. And what looks really bad isn't always bad in the end. So where do you go with that when you make that decision? And that is where you begin to understand who you actually are as a consciousness, as a human being.
And I think, along the same lines of the small voice, your being is the one that perceives deeply. When you meet a person, there's a resonance. There's a resonance with that person that makes you feel, well, I like this person, and I get along. You have a feeling, we'll call it a gut feeling, but it's not really. It's the heart true resonance. Similarly, you will get that same kind of feeling about something or a situation or a person who is not representing themselves as true. Now, where do we bring that all? So the being sees, and the will must decide. The free will must decide. If you're going to place your being into the service or into the subservience of this other will, you still have to decide. You still have to give it. They cannot take it from you. That's number one. And the heart knows when you're giving that away, when you're putting yourself into a situation where you're giving away the ability to choose, whether it's small or large, and it's incredibly sensitive to it. You know it's wrong. The origin. One of the things that came up in that discussion too was sort of the person's ability to sin is linked in some ways to free will. Your ability to decide between right and wrong, to decide to do something which you know, which you feel, which you understand is a wrong thing. And Margaret mentioned this earlier. From spirit, from creation, to give within a piece of itself the ability to deny itself, to act in violation of its own creative principles. We'll break it into the angels, into people. One of the biggest distinctions between angelics, let's say, and those of us who are here created as spirits within flesh, is the angelics are still slaves. They are still completely enslaved to the will of the Creator. So they're just agents. They're messengers. They're fingers of spirit.
Well,
But we have been given true independence, true free will, incredibly precious, the ability to say, I reject you.
well, okay, let me go back a little bit. I don't feel that the angels are slaves. They are servants, complete and in total alignment with the will of God, but they are not enslaved.
They have no free will of their own.
They have to have free will if they can choose to rebel against God. You need the ability to choose in order to decide.
That's a great point. And we should go into it a little bit. I agree with you, but I believe that the rebellion, the interesting thing about the rebellion is it in essence was an experiment of free will, correct? Of angels saying no, and I reject my origin, if you will.
Well, I know there are some teachings that basically say angels don't have free will. Okay.
Yeah.
We can debate that. It's like how many angels fit on the head of a pin.
How many?
I have no idea. But my point being, how can you rebel if you are truly enslaved?
Right, but let's take the angels out of it for the moment. Let's leave them to the side. If they have free will, and let's say that they do have free will, the point of what I was trying to say was that when given free will, you as the embodying spirit of the universe, give a full beingness, a full equality with your spirit, to the point of free will enough to reject. Because if you are still one with the spirit, you can't reject yourself. You are your own being. You are not your own being. You are the being. Yet with that ability to completely give free will, it's the old would whatever the god was make a rock too big that he couldn't lift it himself. Well, it's a conundrum expressed in and sometimes
human
people
terms.
In human terms. But in essence, giving an entity which you have, and I use you in the loosest terms, have created the ability to deny you, completely of your being, and yet made so that it is completely separate from you. That's the essential component of free will, is that it is completely free. that it owes nothing to anyone, and even the decision to reject that which it came from is within its grasp. It can be a rock too big for God can't force you to love him. Isn't that an amazing? God is, if you take God as the God of all things, the universe, unimaginably vast, timeless, all powerful, yet
that's an
lacking one quality. God can't force you to love him. He wants you to decide, and that's the most precious thing, is that you can say yes or no.
I want to go back just for a second to that angelic thought that the angels love God, and they can't choose whether or not to love him. Which means that the fallen ones do love him, but they hate him now because he's rejected them.
We might have to have another show on angels. You know what? Let's go back to the studio, because this could just go on and we would just miss all the commercials. So let's go back, have a couple of commercials. We'll come back on. We'll take our free will break, and we'll come back on the other side, and we'll talk more about freedom.
Batman Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today. Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir. There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on the X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
Thank you for using your free will to choose to listen to this broadcast. You're listening to The Soul of the Everyman. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, man. Yes, we never force our audience to listen. We would if we could.
I don't know about that.
What we did do though, Margaret, is we had a lovely discussion during the break, because we have tremendous discussions during the break. They're actually the best part of the show. And this one's going to break into the second half hour, and we're going to introduce a special guest, if he's with us, coming out of the ether.
He needs a few minutes.
He needs a minute or two. We're talking tonight about free will and the fact that the creator, if we postulate an original being, because there has to be at least one original being, giving to creations free will, made them in essence equal to, with the ability to deny their own existence and to deny their creator. So this is the most precious thing about free will, is that whatever the being, whatever the entity, once it fully is imbued with free will, it is truly free. Are you ready out there? Oh, Will?
I
I hear a
am.
lot of silence. Oh, there he is. And announcing our special guest is Scott.
Welcome, Scott.
Because he's done a lot of studying on this too. So break right in.
Yeah, you had mentioned that according to your sources, the angels have free will, because there are many opinions, maybe is the best way to put it, where some believe angels have no free will whatsoever, and others believe that they do. So, I believe it's Urantia is your source for this?
Well, the Urantia book and one of the, well, I don't know how to describe Ted. Ted is one of the, we call him a celestial being who has been assigned to oversee Earth along with a lot of other helpers, and he appears on the Urantia program about every 3 weeks and answers questions and teaches the audience.
Okay.
Well, my not argument, but my answer to that is I'll concede free will to any being just the point being that the preciousness of it is exactly that once you give freedom, it has to be given totally, or it's not freedom. And once you say this entity, this being has free will, they can never be forced. God, and as I think we mentioned, I'm not sure it was during the break or before, but God can't force you to love him, nor obey him. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, that is. And if you look at it in terms of Tibetan Buddhism, the consciousness is a very precious thing. To be sentient, in other words, conscious of the fact that you are an individual and you have the ability to reflect upon your existence. And in their particular way of thinking, this is a hierarchy of evolvement that happens for consciousness. So in order to get to this point, it takes a lot of lives to get up here and be able to choose, because you must have that consciousness before you're able to choose. So what is the way that they are looking, the Urantia group is looking at angels?
Or TED.
Or TED, yes.
I'm not sure I understand your question, but according to the teachings of the Urantia book, there are lots and lots and lots of different beings, perhaps 10 to 20 times, that's probably low, maybe 50 times more than may be mentioned in the Bible.
Right.
So there's part of creation is this whole bunch of different beings, and my understanding, which could be messed up, but my understanding is that whether you were a being that was born and evolved, or whether you were created, as angels were. Angels are not born, they are created.
Right.
That all of those beings have free will. And with the 3 rebellions that are mentioned in the Urantia book, those beings decided to take a different path. And they were all types of beings. There's all these different levels of beings. I mean, it would take months to explain them all, but
right.
I think the concept is pretty evident that at any stage, that most of the creations mentioned, but not all, most of the creations do evolve, including angels. Angels learn, they experience, they get smarter. And there are other beings, and an overarching concept is that for mortal beings like us, and some other beings a little bit higher up than us, you never die. Once you die, like in this life, you pass on to the next level. And when you die there, although death is a little different after this life, but you keep going. There is a concept, however, that at any one of those stages, even at this stage, like if a person commits suicide, we're considered level 0 people. This is your first experience, and some find life so horrible that they kill themselves. Well, of course, they don't die. They're reborn in this. I don't know if that's the correct word, but they come back to consciousness in the Morantial life, and then if they choose to, and some have, they could choose to not exist. And as the Urantia book teaches, when that happens, as rare as it is, they go before a group called the Ancients of Days, who are considered to have been with the Creator at the time of creation. They're older than the universes, and that they are the only ones, who can erase you from existence, and it would be as if you never existed. So technically, after the human experience, because you are forced to reincarnate in this Morantial life, you could request to get off the boat in a way.
Oh dear.
And some have. Even very young people, like if a teenager takes his life and then when his consciousness comes back in the Morantial life, some have chosen to end it at that point, which is just mind-blowing if you think about it, because of all the future levels that waited were before him, that you could make such a choice at such a early stage of existence.
But let me stop you both at that moment. See, that's the preciousness of free will. And then to bring us back to our topic a bit, not that none of those things matter. They all are perfectly good. All the levels and all the entities and all the beings. Let's just postulate all that, or rather stipulate all that. The point being is that once you provide any entity with free will, it has the ability to do all of those things at any point. Now, should you? I don't know. Yes, no, maybe. Who knows? The point is that you can. So it's the ultimate superpower. We've talked about this before on the Soul of the EveryMan. Your ultimate superpower is not that you can do anything about what happens to you. Is that you can decide what you're going to do about it, how you're going to feel about it, how you're going to react to it. And that doesn't mean that you get to control what happens next. It never does. But the fact that you can decide, again, as we said earlier a couple times, God can't force you to love him or to stay in existence. And that's the superpower, is that you can never be forced. You can only decide to do it, whether you think you're deciding or not, whether you realize that you're making the decision. People say, well, I could have had no choice. You always have a choice. You always have a choice.
You have a choice on how your response is.
Yeah.
But going back a bit, if you don't mind.
Well, why not? We're going for 2 hours tonight. Go.
Okay. Sorry.
Going back a bit.
The concept of the Ancient of Days being able to erase the existence of this lifetime.
But may I stop you there?
Yes.
Only if they decide that they want to be erased. But
yes.
moving on.
Yes. Because the Greeks basically felt they weren't capable of deciding anything. It was always taken out of their hands by the three fates.
Yes.
Right. But this, you have the capacity, the ability, the gift to choose whether to stay within this existence or choose not to. And this world in particular, this one of the foundations of what happens here is that free will is at its core. So if your decision not to continue in this realm, and you go to the grouping of the Ancient of Days, and I believe you said they basically erase your thread, if you would, from this universe, this world. Is that correct, Scott?
The way they phrase it is as if you never existed.
Okay. And if you never existed in this universe, but there can be other universes that do not have free will as one of their foundational rules or laws. So it's a realm of consciousness that far outstrips our human understanding. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We don't comprehend it in this linear fashion. Or rather, we as humans comprehend it in this linear fashion. But existence goes way outside the bounds of what we can possibly conceive. So how is that a possibility? It's one of those where you have to ask God for, can you give me a little revelation on that? because that's outside our ego bound. Because as our ego is like, what do you mean? I can't exist ever again. You know, that it's an astonishing thought when you look at it that way. Your soul, there's something in your soul that goes, no, that can't be.
Hey, well, let me go back to my earlier later point. Again, at the core of free will, you mentioned the universe. This universe is founded upon free will. I would say that's essential.
Yes.
For a universe of anything of any consequence, is that there must be free will within it, and if that free will extends to the point of making a prior condition as though it had never been, you understand that what we're saying is that free will trumps the existence of the universe. It presages it. Because you can do that. If you say, I can choose to have never existed, isn't that an interesting conundrum?
Yes.
Because in choosing, you choose from existence to have never existed. So you, in essence, are trumping the universe over your free will underlies, subsumes what one would call reality. Now, that's both interesting and I think an essential consequence of free will. If your will is truly free, then any decision you make is, if honored, and it seems that it has to be honored, but if honored, to undo your existence as though it had never been, remakes the universe at an essential level.
Right.
Because there are consequences from your existence, regardless. Those all have to get undone. Well, that they can go to the unimaginable depths, because we're talking down to the subatomic level, aren't we?
Well, when you think of it, I know in the Bible they have the book of life, which is written. And just as your sins are blotted out, I'm thinking in terms of, well, your life doesn't need to be written in that book of life for this dimension, this universe, this world. It's just a fascinating thought. It really is.
I'm going to blame Scott for this one. This was a good thought, though.
This was a very good thought, actually.
So you'll be on next week, too.
Well, the reason we don't know about the people that have chose non-existence is...
Because they don't exist.
Because they never existed.
Right. No, I totally get it. No, I'm not arguing with your concept. I'm taking it to its even more logical conclusions, all the way out to the sense that your free will, your decision, yours or mine, to will as though we had never existed, and that being honored. So you will it, it's honored. It remakes at a fundamental level reality. And, you can talk about the butterfly effect or all these other things, but in fact, you're remaking reality at some, people would say, well, it doesn't really matter, but it does, because reality is reality, and remaking it is like really hard.
If you're thinking,
really, again?
You're thinking of it in terms of this life was a life that you may have interacted with, and then suddenly it's no longer there.
That's the butterfly effect.
Just not there. And do you have a memory of interacting with it?
And all that, everything. Right. It's not just it's the memories. It's everything. Every subtle.
This is what you
decision.
This is what you mean by foundational shifting.
Right. It's like if somebody came, I'm ancient of days. Someone comes in front of me and says, "I want to be a." I said, "Listen, kid, we've already done that 3 times this week. You are not going to do that." We have remade. I've just got finished cleaning the universe. I'm not cleaning it again.
Oh my God.
But I know what we have to do. I hate to do this, Scott, but you told us we had to get off. It is 7:57, and I am Michael Lyons.
Oh dear, already. And I'm Margaret.
Scott, you have to do you.
Oh, and
Scott.
I'm me.
And Scott's you. And thank you. You do it.
Oh, thank you for listening.
That was a good.